Here are a few factors that could affect how you feel about Marietta and whether or not you want to move here this year. Firstly, you should know that Marietta is in Cobb County, which is in the northwest part of Metro Atlanta. Also in Cobb County is Smyrna and Kennesaw and Ackworth. And Marietta is kind of, for the most part, split up into two different sections. Actually, I'd say three different sections. There's West Cobb, which is a lot of younger families, and some of the homes there range from being built between the 70s to the early 2000s. Then there's East Cobb, which I think has also some young families, but it's also a bit of older families there as well. And the homes there are a bit older as well. I'd say a lot of 60s to 80s homes. There are some new construction in East Cobb. It's just not very common. And then there's like the southern part of Marietta. There are some homes there that are 70s and 80s, but then there's also a section on the southern end of Marietta that's close to the intersection of Interstate 75 and 285. And this part of Marietta is certainly more unique than the rest of Marietta. This section is kind of called the Cumberland area, and Marietta just barely comes into this Cumberland area. This is where you would find the Atlanta Braves stadium. There are a lot of things to do in this area. There's a shopping mall. It's certainly like a bit of an extension of Atlanta. It's where like Atlanta meets Marietta in this kind of ambiguous area that we call the Cumberland area. But that section of Marietta is kind of different than the rest of it. Most of Marietta is a typical kind of suburban area where there are a lot of different neighborhoods with these HOAs that have the tennis courts and the pools and the clubhouses. And these HOAs are usually somewhere between 300 to 800 per year for the most part. And then there are the sporadic different commercial areas here and there, a lot of different shopping areas, grocery stores, a few Targets and Walmart here and there. But for the most part, it's the kind of suburban area that you would expect in any part of Metro Atlanta. One thing that makes Marietta unique in comparison to the other suburbs of Metro Atlanta is that it ranges a lot in the age of homes. It ranges a lot in the price of the homes. In general, there is a lot of variety in Marietta, and this has to do with the size of Marietta. Because it's so large, there's a lot of different aspects to living in Marietta that you wouldn't necessarily find in another suburb. For example, in Alpharetta, the age of the homes is much more narrow, or in Suwanee, which is a very small city, the price of the homes are all about the same for the most part, right around $600,000-700,000. In Marietta, it ranges from as low as $300,000 to as high as $2 million. There are parts of Marietta that are more rural, and there are parts of Marietta that are more urban. There's Marietta Square, but then there's also a lot of like industrial parts of Marietta. So there's a little bit of everything in this city, which is one of the things that makes it so unique and one of the reasons why so many people move here. If you're thinking about moving to Marietta, you can feel free to call or text me or email me anytime. I'm the one who answers those phone calls, those text messages. I'm so happy to help with your moving needs to the Marietta area. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. But there are a few things about living in Marietta that are kind of some turnoffs to a lot of people that you should know about if you're thinking about moving here. And some of these things are really some red flags, especially as a resident of Marietta myself. These are some things that I wish Marietta would take care of. There are some parts about living in Marietta that are just hovering over the city all the time that it's like, why can't we take care of these things in our city? And so as a Marietta resident, I wish we did a little bit better in these areas, and they are certainly some things that you need to know about if you're thinking about moving here. One of those things that you need to know about is the cost of living. I know that the cost of living is increasing in many different parts of the country, but the same goes for Marietta. Very often people think of the suburban parts of Metro Atlanta as having lower cost of living. They're going to be able to come here and get a lot of home for your money. And while you can get more home for your money here in Marietta than, say, LA, it's not like the cost of living here is staying low. It is increasing. The average home value in Marietta just a few years ago was as low as $300,000, maybe even $250,000. Today, the average cost of a home is about $450,000 to $500,000. And this is a big jump, especially for people who have lived here for a long time. It's something that has really taken a long time to get used to. In addition to that, we're certainly seeing all of the effects of inflation and the economy. We're seeing all of that here in Marietta. The cost of gas and the cost of groceries, all of those things are increasing in price here just as much as they are in other parts of the country. Metro Atlanta, I think, is a bit resilient when it comes to the effects of inflation or having some kind of recession. I think Metro Atlanta would do a good job if we had a recession, but we're not like invincible of that recession. We're not invincible when it comes to that inflation. It's certainly something that we're having here just as much as other parts of the country. Another thing that you should know about is that it is definitely getting crowded here, and there are a lot of people and the traffic is getting worse, with the cost of living here that is a little bit lower than other parts of the country. Even though it's increasing, many people are moving here to Metro Atlanta and to Marietta every year, and Metro Atlantans are certainly feeling the effects of that. And the traffic gets worse every week, if not every day. From Marietta to Atlanta, you can now expect a commute one way of about 45 minutes to an hour just to get to Atlanta. So if you live in the suburbs and you're working in Atlanta, that rush hour traffic jam is certainly something that you have to deal with. So if you're coming here from another part of the country and you're thinking that Marietta is like super rural and you're going to be able to get away from the crowds, that's not really the case here in Marietta. I think Marietta is about 20 to 30 miles away from Atlanta. And so it's definitely still close enough to Atlanta to experience the influx of the crowds. For the areas that are not really seeing that kind of influx, the areas that are more country and more rural, you'd have to go as far out as cities like Canton or maybe Ball Ground, Ellijay. These are kind of the cities that are much more country and much more rural. Another thing that you really need to know about before moving to Marietta is that the homes here, because they're built in the 80s and 90s, they often have like deferred maintenance. They often have roofs that have never been changed. So 25-year-old roofs, or HVAC systems that are 20 to 30 years old, and this kind of thing is super common in Marietta, and it's something that you really have to watch out for when you're trying to buy a home. A home inspection is super important wherever you're buying a home, but even more so in an area that has a lot of homes built in that time frame. If you're buying a newer home, 5 years old, maybe 10 years old, a home inspection is not typically going to come up with a lot of issues. But a home built in the 80s, especially here in Marietta, is going to have lots of problems. And very often, these sellers don't take care of these problems because there are very few homes for sale. So it's something that you have to watch out for if you're buying a home here in Marietta when it comes to that deferred maintenance. And then another one that you really need to know about here in Marietta is that we do have some very good public schools, but we also have some poor public schools. For example, Soap Creek Elementary School is a 9 out of 10. That's in Marietta. But Powers Ferry Elementary School, which is also in Marietta, is a 5 out of 10. And Lassiter High School, which is a 10 out of 10, that's in Marietta and East Cobb. But Marietta High School, which is in the center of Marietta, is a 6 out of 10. So if finding a home that's in a good public school district is important to you, then you really got to be careful what part of Marietta you're moving to. Again, some of those schools are great. Some of those schools are 10 out of 10, but some of those schools are struggling. And so you really want to be aware of what school district that home is going to be in. When it comes to the housing market in Marietta in 2024, what I expect is for there to be kind of similar activities that we see in 2023. It's going to be busy in the spring, and we'll have a lot of buyers and very few sellers, making it a seller's market. And then in the fall and the winter, again, I think we'll see less buyers in the market. I think we'll see interest rates going back up and it'll kind of become a buyer's market again. I think we're going to be kind of in this pattern for a while, especially in the suburbs of Metro Atlanta. But again, as someone who lives here in Marietta, I certainly love this city. There really isn't any other city that I would want to be in. I think Marietta is the best of all of the suburbs of Metro Atlanta. So if you want to know more about what it's like to live here, check out this video. I'll see you there.